Welcome. My name is Kendra Morgan, and I'm the host of the Rise and Build podcast, where we hope to empower you to rise up and build a strong family, knowing you have to strengthen your hands to do the good work. Come with us as we rise and build. Hey, you guys, welcome to the Rise and Build podcast. Today, I am so excited. I am sitting across from Chris Breiland. He is the head of Asbury's Classical School. He's had lots and lots of experience working with children and families. He's been a principal in the past. And so we are going to dive into the series, Building Kids in the World We Live In. What does that look like? Today's topic is screen time. Never an easy topic to talk about. When we wanted to kind of share some research and knowledge with this, Chris was the first person that popped into my head. And so he's going to share the good and the bad, and we're going to dive into this. But first, I want you to get to know Chris. Chris, tell us about you.
Well, my name's Chris Breiland, and as Kendra said, I serve as the head of Asbury's Classical School, which launched its inaugural kindergarten class this year, and we're enrolling kindergarten through third moving forward, and hope to become a K through 12 school after that. And awesome. Yeah, it's been great. I am actually from North Dakota originally, so I grew up, born and raised in North Dakota, moved down to Oklahoma to go to college at Oklahoma Wesleyan in Bartlesville. And then graduated from there. I studied theology and went on to seminary to become a pastor. But I never actually was employed by a church up until about a year ago. I was always in educational ministry.
I love that. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Cool.
So I studied to be a pastor and never actually went to the church until I was hired by Asbury just about a year and a half ago.
Awesome.
And my passion has always been for families.
Yes.
That's my own family. Has been just such a priority for me in being intentional as a father and as a husband. I have 3 children. A 7-year-old and then twin 3-year-olds.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so, quite honestly, it feels like I'm coming out of a dark tunnel. I can kind of see the
yes,
light at the end,
yes.
and we're getting a little more autonomous, and we
Yes.
can actually leave the house occasionally, which is great.
Oh man.
Yeah. And so, family discipleship and prioritizing my family, and what we watch and what we consume and how we do life is really important to me.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Tell us about just your passion for children in general. I know you've always said you've kind of been in the education field. Wasn't your plan? Mm-hmm. Sounds like you were really good studying to be a pastor, got into the education, obviously haven't really left that field. Yeah. So talk to us about why. Why do you like children so much?
Yeah. I really believe that there's nothing more important in this world than a child.
I love that.
And I say that because children become adults, right?
Yeah.
So there's nothing more important than a person.
Yeah.
And since they begin as children, the way that they're formed and they're shaped as children often dictates the trajectory of their life. Now we know that, cycles can be broken and trajectories can be changed, but nonetheless, it's really, really important in those early years how they're formed and shaped and molded, and how it dictates their trajectory moving forward.
I love it. Yeah. It's building their future, right?
Yeah,
We're building
absolutely.
our future.
Yeah,
the children are. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to dive in to this topic, screen time. And I feel like once people hear we're talking about screen time, they're going to turn it off because it's easy to ignore. But from a child development perspective, I know how important this topic is. We've seen a change and an adjust with screen time since COVID. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that for sure. But tell me, why is this such an important topic to you?
Yeah, for me personally, I realized a few years ago, probably right around the COVID pandemic time, that I personally had a problem with screens. And I think, if most adults are, pretty honest with themselves, they realize actually I kind of have an issue with this as well.
Yeah.
I'm scrolling constantly, or I'm at work at home, and, it's screens and technology are ubiquitous in our lives at this point. And so for me personally, I had this realization. My daughter was, 4 or 5 at the time, and I have a day off. I'm sitting on the couch, and I'm just kind of scrolling mindlessly through social media. And my daughter comes up, and she says, "Dad." And I keep scrolling, and she says, "Dad." And I keep scrolling.
Yeah.
And she says, Dad, a third time. And then my wife, who kind of saw the whole interaction, was like, well, Chris, your daughter said Dad 3 times and you didn't even look up. And I was just like, what kind of message did that send to her? Like, that whatever I'm doing on the device is more important than, what she has to say or what she wants. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. It makes me think of our reading specialist was tutoring with a child, and she got a really important message. And she said, I looked down at it, and she goes, I never pick up my phone at work, but I picked it up and I answered the text. And she said, I quickly looked back at the child and I apologized, and it didn't faze the kid. He was like, what do you mean? And she's like, that was rude of me to interrupt our time together. And he was like, oh, like it was not a big deal. Where like, I think if she would have picked the phone up, if I was in a conversation with her, I would have thought it was rude. But I think the younger generation lives that way. They don't know it's rude because they're always looking at someone looking at a screen. And Jean was like, Kendra, I've never thought about this younger generation understanding that it's rude to interrupt a conversation to look at a text or answer. It's just, I think they're being raised with us looking at a screen. So I love that you brought that story up.
Yeah. So we did that. Like we have made it so that, the norms in their life are, phones are a priority, right?
Yes.
Like that's like when that thing goes off, it's more important than what we're doing here in face to face. And
right.
And that's a tragedy. That
is.
Stinks.
No, it is. It is for sure. Okay. So do you want to talk about the good or the bad first?
Let's talk about the bad.
Okay.
Because it's the obvious. I don't think anybody needs to be told that. I think at this point, in 2024, everybody kind of realizes, like we know that there's some negative effects there. We know that, I scroll too much or I do too much social media, or I'm having an unhealthy work-life balance because I'm constantly on my device and answering emails and what have you. But all of the studies, all of the research is really indicating since 2010 that anxiety, depression, suicide ideation, all of these things are skyrocketing among adolescent children. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that can be pinpointed is device usage and social media.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where you look in research. I mean, it's all pointing in that same direction, particularly for young ladies, for young girls. It's really affecting them mentally and socially.
Yeah. Have you seen some of those affect, like even before being at Asbury? I know you were a principal. Did you see some of those issues coming up in the children that you worked with?
Yes. Absolutely.
Do you mind sharing some of that with us?
Yeah. So I taught all the Bible classes for the high school that I was at. And we have we've always had a no cell phone policy in class. Mm-hmm. It was always really difficult. When the bell rings, they show up to class, and we talk Bible, and we do our lesson. And in that moment, like I feel like I have them, and it makes sense. And they're like, nodding their head in agreement, like, wow, this makes a ton of sense. And then the bell rings, and then they leave, and it's like there's nothing else in the world that really reinforces what we just did and talked about in the class. It's the device comes out, and they're just inundated with information and photos and what have you, and all of the social media, and it's like everything that we talked about in the class just kind of goes out the window, out in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
And so I would watch my students, in a healthy environment in the classroom, and then you would see, young, 14, 15, 16-year-old kids sitting around a table, and they all have a device out, and they're not actually talking to each other. Right. Like they're in physical proximity to one another,
Correct.
but they're doing something else, on a device. Yeah.
We were just at an event the other night, and it was high school kids. So there was the Palm squad and the cheer team, some football players, and the basketball team. And my husband and I were watching the interactions of the boys and girls. And it was almost like we were at like a 5th, 6th grade dance. Yeah. Like it was awkward. Yeah. But then anytime like they really
boys on one side, girls on the other sort of thing.
High school kids. And so we were just watching it. And anytime there was really like downtime, like they weren't performing, they were picking up those phones. And I think it's almost a security thing because they don't know how to interact. So they pick up that phone to kind of try to figure out how to fit in socially. So, I mean, we picked up on that too, just kind of watching the children. So, okay, so we know what research is saying. And I feel like for us at the Building All Children office, what we are seeing is because of COVID, the children had to be on screens for schooling. And I think the parents were working from home and the younger children were kind of stuck in front of the TV we were surviving, right? And I get all that. But what we have started doing is we have started asking parents, do they watch TV before school? Do they watch TV on the way to school? When you pick them up, do they watch TV? When you get home, are they watching TV before dinner? Do they watch TV after dinner? And we have a little survey. And when they end up checking it, I mean, it's hours that they're on the screen or on a tablet or on a phone. So the research is showing that it's affecting social skills, affecting development. But what do we do with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, first, I think it starts with us as adults. Like we have to model the behavior that we desire to see in our children.
Okay.
Nothing screams phony to our children more than do as I say and not as I do.
Yes.
Right? Like you can't sit in front of the TV all day, but I'm going to watch Netflix all night tonight.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, right. They see that, they catch on to that. And so we have to model the behavior, I think, that we desire to see in our children. The second thing that I would say is I think we need to understand sort of like what technology is, like what's the purpose of it,
right?
And ultimately, the purpose of technology is to make our lives easier.
Okay.
Like that's what it's for. Think about like a hammer; it makes our lives easier, pounds in a nail.
Yeah.
The saw, chainsaw does the exact same thing. Helps us take a tree down. A tablet or device is intended to make our lives easier.
Yeah.
And in our world, there's really three places or environments that are for the purpose of formation: the home, the school, and the church.
Okay.
And anytime we introduce technology into these three places, the home, the school, and the church, it turns them from places of formation into places of consumption.
Okay.
So the home should be a place where we are forming adults. Like we're taking children and we're giving them all that they need to be in order to be fully thriving adults. Mm-hmm. The school is the same thing. We're trying to form children into educated and critically thinking adults. We want them to mature. And the church has the same thing to help these, people and children grow in their faith and grow in spiritual maturity. So all of these environments are for the purpose of formation, but when you put technology into them, we become consumers. And so let me give you an example of what that looks like. So at home, there's a big difference between going out in the backyard and throwing the football around and playing football in the backyard. Mm-hmm. There's a very big difference between that and sitting on the couch on Sunday afternoon watching NFL, right? One, you're actively doing something with your children. You're teaching them a skill. You're having fun and building a relationship. The other, while you can have some shared relationship over the game and the team, you're really mostly mindlessly consuming.
Right. Yeah.
Same at school, right? We introduced technology years ago when the iPad came out. It kind of became ubiquitous. Schools were so excited that the iPad would be able to allow students to carry all of their books in one small device.
Right.
Because I don't know if you remember, there were like all these conversations about like, our kids' bags are too heavy and it's causing them to, hurt their spine and bend over and do all that stuff. And so schools were so excited, like, wow, this is going to save us a ton of money on textbooks, and it solves that problem of hurting our kids' backs.
Right.
Well, schools all across the country adopted iPads, and they quickly realized that reading scores just plummeted.
Right.
Because they realized that, like, the way that our brains work when you read a book is like you when you go to recall the information, you can kind of visualize it in your brain. Like it's on the left-hand page about a third of the way down, halfway through the book.
Right.
And you don't get that when you kind of endlessly scroll through through the iPad.
Yeah. Okay. So there is actually research with that.
Yeah.
I just read a whole article on that Gene Evans, our reading coordinator, sent me, because there's research to show that children are not scoring as well on a screen or a tablet as far as like reading a book, and it's affecting reading scores. So yeah, you hit a good point with that. It's a big deal for sure.
And the same thing with the church. So the third environment. Okay. There's a big difference between showing up to church on Sunday morning,
okay,
going down to the front and receiving Holy Communion, kneeling at the altar with your family maybe, and participating in, the worship service.
Yeah.
There's a very big difference between that and watching it online every Sunday, right? One is consuming, the other is actually participating and forming.
Yeah.
And so while technology is good and it's helpful in some regards, we have to make sure that it stays in its proper place. And that's kind of the language that I like to use.
Okay.
I'd like to be the guy, like in my brain, like I just want to like throw it all out the window, like,
right,
because it's causing so many problems for so many people.
Right.
But I don't think that's the reality.
Yeah.
I think we have to figure out a way to make sure that it stays in its proper place and has boundaries around it so that it doesn't consume
So
us.
Could you talk a little bit about the boundaries? I mean, I'm sitting here as a listener listening to this thinking, well, how do I get it out of my home? What are the healthy boundaries in the home with screen time?
So 5 or 6 months ago, my wife and I were talking and we said, I think we're all watching too much TV. So we kind of downgraded our subscriptions, Netflix and all of that. We canceled a few of them. And we realized we just kind of shifted to the others and we're still watching the same amount of TV. And so I went up on our TV, flat screen. It's mounted above our fireplace, and I took it off the fireplace and I went and put it in the attic. I said, "There we go. I fixed the problem."
Wow. Okay.
And I put it in the attic, and it was really hard. It was really hard for a few weeks. We then had to interact more with our children, and we had to, dinner became much more difficult because we have to cook and somehow keep the kids at bay, and, so they're not running amok. But after a couple of weeks, we saw a significant improvement.
Yeah.
Pretty soon they start playing together and they start, doing imaginary things and, reading books and things like that. And it was really good. And then my wife had a scheduled surgery that kind of took her off her feet for 3 weeks in recovery. And the first thing I did, I was like, we got to get the TV back out.
Right.
Yeah. I was like, I need some sort of help.
Yes.
I need something to I just need to get dinner on the table and I need to get clothes ready for tomorrow and lunches and all of those things.
Yeah.
And so we brought it back out.
Okay.
And so we quickly realized okay, maybe for our household, scrapping the whole project isn't going to work. But putting some boundaries around it and saying, okay, we only watch, a show or a movie when we're all together and we're watching it and can participate in it together.
Like a family event.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's kind of been the thing for us. We try to limit our screen time to about an hour a day.
Okay.
And if we're going to watch TV, we do it, on a Friday night, we order pizza, we do the whole thing.
Yeah.
And we try to watch something of substance.
Yeah.
We try to watch something that, isn't just mindless or YouTube, but something that has some substance to it.
Yeah, it's good. We had a family that came to us and their child had no conversation back and forth. And we always say that screen doesn't provide that natural connecting those neurons of back and forth conversation. And we knew this child was watching too much screen. So we were encouraging the family, same thing, kind of to just limit the screen time. So what we recommended was that they just put a blanket over the TV. And the kids knew that when the blanket was over the TV, you don't ask, the TV doesn't come on. But when the blanket comes off, then there could be some time as a family to watch TV. And it worked. The kids' language started developing, conversation skills started happening. The areas that he was falling behind in development really started to work because I think he was getting that interaction with the families. So that is one way we recommended. But you're taking it off the wall. We had a dad that did that. Same thing. We kind of encouraged less screen time and he just took it off the wall because what would happen is his 5-year-old was just angry after screen time. They just saw such a difference in their behavior that he didn't know what to do. And he did that. He just took it off and he ended up bringing it back. But sometimes to break a habit, you do have to maybe go extreme and do something to get away from it. But yeah.
Yeah. And this conversation isn't actually a new one, regarding technology.
No.
We have more advanced technology now than ever before.
Yeah.
But in the 50s and 60s, the same conversation was taking place around television, which is why Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood came about. Fred Rogers saw, this television is going to be in every single household in the country.
Yeah.
I'm afraid of what children are going to be watching and seeing, so I'm going to create content that is wholesome and, educates them and helps them become virtuous.
Yeah,
adults.
which is exactly what you're saying. Right. I mean, there is research to show that children watching television shows that are education is better than just the mindless scrolling that doesn't teach them anything. It's totally what you're talking about. Yeah. So it's good stuff. Talk to me about social media. Are you a fan of social media? You kind of mentioned a little bit about some research with that. What do you think of social media?
I'm personally not a fan. Okay. About 2 years ago, I deleted all of my accounts.
Wow.
Primarily because I started feeling or kind of sensing that it was somehow sort of nefarious on the back end towards me. Mm-hmm. So, for example, like the algorithm, I think we're kind of generally aware that there's an algorithm at work behind social media that feeds you more content that it thinks you will like and enjoy. I found that to be like really sort of manipulative or kind of nefarious in the sense that, like, as I'm scrolling, it starts pushing things towards me that it thinks I might like because I'm a man, because I seem to be of a certain age, or I'm, lingering too long on one thing or another. And it starts pushing more content like that towards you.
Right.
And so if you say linger on a photo too long, it's going to generate and push more content like that it thinks you will like. And I found that to be like unhelpful. Right. And so personally, I was just like, this has got to go. And if, as a fully formed adult man, social media and technology are difficult for me to keep in its proper place, then for children, like, this is going to just wreck their world, I think.
Yeah.
And so I really do miss social media in some regards. I miss the life updates, I miss the birth announcements, I miss the weddings and all of that stuff. And I really do feel like sometimes I'm the last one to be informed on pretty much all of these things.
Right.
But as far as the negative aspects of it consuming my time and mindlessly scrolling and being fed things that aren't healthy for me as a man, that I think it's good to get rid of it.
It's so weird to me that as I scroll, because I love people and I love knowing what's going on in people's worlds and their lives. But as I'm scrolling, it helps me keep up with people. But then the research shows that we're more lonely than ever before. And I felt convicted a while back of just the mindless scrolling. So I decided that I wasn't going to comment on anything. Instead, I was going to text people. So if I saw someone was pregnant, I didn't comment on the Facebook or Instagram. I went and texted them and congratulated them. And it was crazy, the more in-depth conversations we had, and how I really felt connected with people. But I couldn't keep it up. I mean, I couldn't keep doing that. So I just really did it for about a week. And it made me realize the relationship is so important, but it's the connecting and not just the scrolling on the social media. Why do you think the kids that are on social media, or just the children in general, why are they so lonely?
Well, I think it's honestly because they're not actually interacting with humans face to face.
Yeah.
The Lord designed us that way.
Yes,
it's just a fact. We're designed for community. We're designed to be in relationship with one another. And while it does, allow me to connect with my grandma who's in North Dakota still, 1,000 miles away, and that's awesome, it's still not a substitute for face-to-face interaction.
But what do we do to help them? Because when they get face-to-face, they don't know what to do. Yeah. So how do we help that?
Yeah. I think that's where the family and the church come into play.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. So it's our responsibility as parents to form our children. We can't pass the buck onto the school. We can't pass it on to anybody else. The Lord gave us the responsibility of raising them into what they ought to become.
100% agree.
And so when that's the case, we have to take a look at our children and say, well, if there's a deficit here socially, or if there's an issue here, socially or mentally, like, it's my responsibility to help them overcome that. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, with my daughter, she's 7 years old. And when she was younger, 4 or 5, little kids are bashful. You bring them out in public, and you have all these adults sort of towering over them,
right?
And you want them to say hi to them, or
right.
And they hide behind your leg. Well, we had conversations with her over time and say, well, Charlotte, when you meet somebody, it's kind to greet them and to,
right.
and to put out your hand and say, good morning. I'm
right.
happy to see you. It honors them, it values them, and respects them. And so that's something that we should do. And so over time, you practice, and the next thing you know, I have a 7-year-old who loves greeting people.
Right.
And so she's our chief greeter at church.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's teaching them those social interactions that they're probably missing naturally, I guess. Being aware of that. But you have to be off your screen devices and notice those things in order to teach it, I guess.
Yeah. I also think there's a big issue with, in our world, we've sort of segregated children and adults and put everybody in their own space.
Yeah.
Churches are a prime example of this over the last, 30 plus years or what have you. You walk into most churches and there's a kids building, there's a students building, and then the old folks or whatever meet in the middle. And we've learned on this side of things that was actually detrimental to the church and to everybody's faith. We did not pass the faith down to our children because we segregated everybody. And there's an aspect of children need to be around adults in order to learn how to be adults.
Yeah, that's good.
Right? And so when they're sitting at the dinner table with you, they should be sitting at the dinner table with you,
yes,
right? Children should be up at the table with you and
agree.
part of the conversation and participating. Yeah.
So if I'm listening to this and I'm like, okay, this is great, but my kids have social media, I'm not going to take it away from them. What boundaries and rules do you think need to be in place?
One, I would say, you still have the authority and the ability to say, hey, I made a mistake. I don't know that social media was right for you or right for our family at the age of 12 or 13 or 14.
Okay.
Right? I think you're well within your rights as a parent to say, I made a mistake and I know more now than I did then.
Yeah.
And let's try to get rid of this together, right? I'll get rid of mine and you get rid of yours and we'll do it together. As far as boundaries go, putting it in its proper place, I like to say, wake up before your phone.
Okay.
So what I really recommend, what I love for people to do is wake up first thing, pray, read your scriptures, and then pick up the phone.
Okay.
Right? Don't go to your phone first thing.
Yes.
Make sure that you and it knows its proper place. Yeah.
Okay. What about for children? What are the boundaries with them? I mean, I hear what you're saying. Mm-hmm. You're kind of like, no. But if I'm listening to this and I'm okay with them having some social media, do you feel comfortable talking about the percentage of boys seeing images that they shouldn't be seeing? Do you feel comfortable kind of talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, generally, when people ask me, when should I get my kid social media or when should I get my kid a smartphone? Mm-hmm. The answer I generally give is, when are you okay with them seeing explicit content or pornography?
Okay. And I said boys, but girls are seeing it too. I shouldn't have said boys. We're all, yes.
Yeah. And for girls, it's almost like it's equally as bad because there's the comparison issue. There's the body image issues.
Yeah.
There's those things that really affect a young lady's brain when they view that as well.
Yeah.
They're unrealistic and not real. And so that's really kind of the answer that I give is, when you're ready for them to see or be pushed explicit content, then that's when you need to move towards a device or social media.
What are your rules? I know your children are still younger, but what are the rules when they are on the school bus or they are at a friend's house or they're seeing a distant cousin? And those kids don't have the same rules that your family has. How do you handle social media screen time in those situations?
Yeah. So There's a book that came out not long ago. It's called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt.
Yes, so good.
And he talks about the issue of, a lot of parents are realizing, social media and technology aren't great for our kids, but I feel like I'm the only one, and I'm like swimming upstream trying to do this thing by myself, and it feels impossible.
Yes.
So Jonathan Haidt talks about this issue as being a collective action problem.
Okay.
That families need to band together and commit to going social media free or cell phone free, so that we can all do it together. Mm-hmm. And so I think the church is a great place for that. So our church in particular, we just have a strong group of like-minded families who, my kids have tons of friends at church. We're all committed to the same sort of values of, low technology. We sit under the same teaching of our pastor. And so we have a lot of like-minded families doing the same thing. Now, when it comes to other families who, they have different policies, they have older siblings with cell phones in the home, we just say, you can play with them, but you can't go over to their home, or, you can't, do things like that.
Okay. Yeah. I know you believe in the Bible and you're all about truth. So I want to talk about that for sure. But before we get into scripture, is there anything else you want our listeners to know about screen time?
I think I would just say, we can do this.
I love that.
I think we can do this. I struggle with it myself. Like, I'm still trying to navigate the same waters with my family as everybody else is. And it is hard. Mm-hmm. But we really have two options. We let it consume us, or we put it in its proper place and keep it behind boundaries.
Yeah, I think what you just said is so important, because the reality is, and the research is showing, it affects development, it affects learning, it affects social skills. So the more that you can limit it and the more that you can set those healthy boundaries, the better you're building your children, right? And the better wife they're going to be, the better husband they're going to be, the better friend they're going to be. And so it seems, I'll be honest, like listening to you, I want to make some changes, but those changes seem a bit overwhelming. But it has to be done. It's important, right? Absolutely.
And the thing about change is often you can't just flip a switch or do it overnight. It just takes the development of habits over time that produce the result that you want.
That's good.
And so it really kind of starts with just saying, okay, today I'm going to wake up, I'm going to pray first, and then I'll go to my phone or work or what have you.
Yeah.
And helping my children see that, okay, when you come home from school, your cell phone gets plugged in on the counter and we leave it there for the rest of the evening. It doesn't go into the bedroom with you. It doesn't, it stays there. And just small little habits over time that might feel difficult in the moment become easier as you go.
Let me ask you this. I know we're running out of time, but for those children that you're doing that, setting those boundaries, being healthy with, when they go off to college, do they go crazy because they haven't had it? Now they have free reign to it. I mean, if they move out of the home and now they can have whatever they have, do those boundaries stick? Or are they like, hey, I finally can do what I want to do and I'm going to go crazy with it?
I don't have much evidence to know one way or the other, but I do know that as you're raising your children and as you instill values in them, right? We're not just getting rid of phones and technology to be mean, overbearing parents.
Right.
We're doing this because there is a lot on the internet that's not healthy for you.
Yeah, I love that.
And when you realize, like, and you become an adult and you realize, wow, there's a lot on the internet that's not healthy for me. I want to stay away from those things.
Yeah.
And so hopefully, we raise our boys and girls to be to have character, to have virtue, so that they're able to put boundaries in place as they grow as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. What scripture do you have to share with us?
My favorite passage as it relates to just family discipleship, it comes from Deuteronomy chapter 6. It's a famous passage. It's called the Shema. And it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, and when you walk along the road, and when you lie down, and when you get up." And that's Moses talking to the young families of Israel. The older generation had passed away in the wilderness. The young generation is about to inherit the promised land. And this is his pep talk saying, it's on you.
Yeah.
Parents, like it's your responsibility, and it's your job to pass down the faith and to mold and to shape your children so that they will thrive in the promised land.
Yeah.
And so I love that.
I do
that's
too.
kind of how I view,
Love it.
our family and discipleship as
Yeah.
It's our job.
Yeah, it's your job. I love it. It's all of our jobs to raise our children, and the Lord gave them to us to mold their heart, and the way we mold it will be forever, which is powerful. Chris, thank you. I love your knowledge in this area. I could honestly probably spend a couple more hours with you. I feel like you have a lot more to share, so we might even have you back so that you can share more, because there's just a lot to this that I feel that we could provide to a lot of the listeners.
Great.
So,
well, I had a blast. So thank you so much, Kendra.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We are also in this series going to talk about focus and how screen time can affect that. Dr. Hamilton is going to do that. And then we are going to interview my older girls. So I have 23 and 21-year-old that have screens, and we're going to talk about that and what the Morgan rules are with that too. So this is going to be a great series. It's going to help a lot of families. So thank you, Chris, for your time.
Great. Thanks, Kendra.
Let us close with a word of prayer. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for these children in our lives. Thank you for all the resources you have placed in our life to help us rise up and build. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you for listening to the Rise and Build podcast, brought to you by Building All Children, a child development program in Tulsa, Oklahoma. To learn more about Building All Children or the Rise and Build podcast, please visit buildingallchildren.org. This podcast is crowdfunded. We appreciate our sponsors and the donations given by our listeners. Come with us as we rise and build.